Do you folks remember in our first Python lab where we typed in some example commands and some of them had kind of a surprising result? I remember some of you were surprised when we said print 2 in double quotes plus 3 in double quotes. And I think you were expecting Python to tell us the answer was 5, but instead it told us the answer was 23. So we're going to talk about how Python evaluates expressions for non-numeric data types and see why it gave us that 23 as the answer. Python allows us to use some of the common arithmetic operators we typically think of as working only on integers or decimal values, things that are numeric. Python allows us to use some of those operators on string values. So for example, we can use the plus operator with strings, and when we do that, Python joins the strings together to create one giant string from the individual pieces. And in computer science, we call that operation concatenation. It just means you're joining together the strings. So for example, if we had a variable greeting, it's spelled wrong in your notes, but you can fix it up. Greeting is hello, and somebody's name is Dr. A, then we could tell the computer, I want to print those two things together and make one big text block from them, and it'll print out hello, Dr. A. Notice that when we use the plus operator, it doesn't put a space between these words at all. It just puts them right next to each other. If you wanted to add a space in there, you could say print greeting plus a space in double quotes and then name. And it would add the space in there between hello, the value of greeting, and the name, Dr. A. So the concatenation operator is one of the operators that works on strings. Another arithmetic operator that works on strings is the multiplication operator, and it's a shorthand way of saying that you want to repeat a string a specific number of times. So for example, if we wanted to create a greeting, hello, and repeat it 5 times, we could say print greeting times 5. And then Python would know to print out that word hello 3 times. Let's try it out in Python just to see how it works. Greeting equals, I'm going to do hi this time. And then if we say print greeting times 5, it'll print hi, 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 hi. But notice it doesn't put any spaces in between them. That's because there's no space included in my literal value hi. If I wanted there to be a space between them, I should probably add that in here after the I character and before the closing double quotes. Another important thing to notice that sometimes is confusing to students is that the word greeting does not go in double quotes. Even though it's storing text information, you only put the double quotes around the literal value that you're storing. You don't put the double quotes around the variable identifier. Variable identifiers never have double quotes around them. Some of the arithmetic operators that we've learned about aren't defined to work for strings, so don't assume that just everything works for strings. So for example, if we tried to use subtraction with a string, if we tried to say print greeting minus h, Python would give us an error where it's like, I don't know what you're trying to do. There's no supported operation for the subtraction symbol that involves strings, and so it's just telling us I'm real confused. This type error unsupported operand types for string and string means you're using two operands that are both strings, and this operation, subtraction, isn't supported for strings. Let's try another example. Let's try the division operator. Let's say greeting divided by 2. You might guess something like that might be useful or make sense. Maybe it means that you're supposed to like split the greeting into individual characters or something, but Python gets real confused about that. And again, it gives us that same type error, unsupported operand types for the division operator. has a string and an int. So it's saying you're using a string and an integer as your operands, and I don't know how to perform the division operation on those types of operands. In your textbook, you'll learn about some extra functions that can be used only with string data, things like uppercase, lowercase, and strip. So be sure to check those out when you do your reading assignment to learn more about how Python applies those kind of operations to text information. In your class notes, there's some review questions to help you review the information that we've learned in this particular unit. First, can you define the term expression in your own words? What makes something an expression? I would say that an expression is formed by joining together operands and operators to perform some type of calculation. The calculation might be done on numeric values, or it might be done on text values, just depending on the context. Python evaluates expressions and can assign a value to a variable. That's what we learned about last time in class. And then in your notes, there's a table where it has various operators and various data types. See if you can figure out which operators are defined on various data types. Don't forget, you can always type your examples into Python to see if they work. So I typed all of the arithmetic operators in with integer operands, and absolutely all of them worked, which makes sense. They're mathematical operators. We hope that they'll work on integers. They also all work on floating point values. Again, because they're standard mathematical operators, we would expect them to work on all numeric data types. So we've seen that some of these basic arithmetic operators don't work well with the string data type, but a few of them do. So the plus and the multiplication sign, those both perform reliably with strings. The plus operator performs concatenation, and the multiplication operator performs repetition or repeating of a particular character text. The other operators like subtraction, division, integer division, exponents, and modulus do not work with string data types. What do you think would happen if you typed in an expression into a Python program but didn't save the result in a variable? So let me open up a file so that we can see like what that would look like if you just did like 5 plus 3. So when we run the program, nothing really happens. So it makes the calculation, 5 plus 3 gets the 8, but then it doesn't tell us to do anything with the 8. There's no way for us to recall the 8 or display the 8. If we want to be able to recall or use the result in other operations, we have to store it in a variable, something like result equals 5 plus 3. Then we would be able to use the value of result in other Python commands. Remember that as you're exploring various Python instructions and learning about them, it's always a good idea to type your examples into the Python window so that you can experience firsthand how Python interprets that instruction. At this point, you should understand how expressions can be evaluated by the computer and how the result of an expression can be stored in a variable. You should be aware of the order of operations and how they're used to make mathematical calculations. And you should recognize that some operators are defined on non-numeric data types and can be used with strings in Python.